Welcome to all our attendees and our speaker. We are here for session 4.1, Automating Collections Review, Prospect and Limitations. We are recording this session. Live transcription is on. If you would like to adjust whether or not that shows up on your screen, you can click the live transcription icon and toggle to your selection. Kaylin Blunt and I are co-moderating this session. If you have questions, there will be a time reserved for answering those at the end of the presentation. If you would like to pose those anonymously, you can contact Kaylin or I, and we will present those anonymously for you. That said, I want to give Rolando as much of this session as I can, so I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Amy and Kaylin, for helping moderate this session. Go ahead and share my screen. All right, so I hope we can all see the screen. Amy, could you give me a thumbs up? You can see it, great. Just wanted to make sure I have running multiple screens here. Well, hi everyone. Excited to be here with you all today. So the title of my presentation is Automating Collections Review, Prospect and Limitations. Before I start, I want to quickly introduce myself. My name is Rolando Rodriguez. I am a first-year grad student here in the School of Information Library Science in the Masters of Science and Information Science program. I'm also a Caroline Academic Library Associate who works at Davis and the RNIS Department, Instruction and Research Services Department, and in Digital Research Services. And my pronouns are he, him, his. Great. So as I begin, I want to first just lay out my main goal for my presentation, which is to share a learning experience I had at the end of last semester and sort of begin a conversation or continue a conversation that I've been having with some folks and hopefully begin new ones with others who may be interested in sort of this topic. So to give a roadmap of what I'll be talking about today, I'll begin by sort of providing the context. What was the situation that me and Sarah Morris, the librarian I was working with, found ourselves in. Second, the issue was trying to automate sort of collection reviews. Three, I'll be talking about some of the semi-automated options I've worked with in light of these issues, and then I'll end with some key takeaways, what we might think about moving forward regarding this topic. So to provide context, I'm thinking about library workers and database review, as I've said. So before I talk about my specific situation, I want to kind of give a broad context. None of this should be new information to many library workers, but I thought it'd be helpful to start with some numbers because librarians, information workers, library workers, we love our numbers. So I want to talk about sort of the state of libraries in the past, maybe 10 years. So especially in light of COVID, studies have found that about 75% of libraries are operating on reduced budgets. If we look at the picture on the right, we can see that for most libraries, what is being cut the most due to these reduced budgets are the collections themselves, with staffing being second or sometimes equal to operations. But what's important about this is that as library budgets continue to decrease, reflecting on our collections, what is essential, what is non-essential, becomes more and more important. And at the same time that libraries are being faced with these difficult decisions about what to do with our collections. The cost of these journal subscriptions, of these database journal subscriptions, continue to increase approximately 5.5 to 7% per year. So this brings us to the situation that I found myself in. So and this is just an example of how continually revising affordability and efficacy of our databases is an essential practice that librarians and library workers will have to continue operating. So November of 2021, I was working with Sarah Morris, the Humanities and Digital Pedagogy Librarian here at UNC Chapel Hill, to look at titles and a database, ProQuest One Literature, a database that we are cutting due to budget cuts. So one thing we want to do is look at a couple of the collections included in this database, primarily those that include works of Latin American women, African American writers, Black writers, and other sort of historically marginalized groups, and see what primary works would we be losing, and if we lost access through this database, would we still have access through our online catalog. Now, just looking at about 3 of these sub-collections, there's about 7 total, we have more than 2,000 primary text results. And so as I was, just looking at, the scope of our results, I noticed that, either I could just randomly select a couple titles, see if we have them or not. If I wanted to be thorough, I would have to either manually type these titles out and the authors, or even just copy and pasting. That would still be hours of work, hours that I did not think would be the best use of time. So this led me to think about, is there a way to automate this extraction, right? Could I just export a list of all these titles that I could then easily cross-check with the catalog? I found that it wasn't quite as easy as I perhaps hoped it would be. So I want to talk about some issues with automation. So I found that there are 2 main roadblocks to automations. One is that there's a lack of tools. And when I say lack of tools, I mean there is a lack of APIs. APIs being application programming interface, which is a tool that allows 2 different applications to communicate, send information, and to one another and interact, or built-in features such as exporting a list of your results as a Excel file or a CSV file. Found that many databases do not actually have these features. And second, for those who want to try to create sorry, I was checking the chat. Everything is clear. For those who wanted to try to create other solutions, often the terms of service of these databases prohibited the use of custom automated options, such as web scrapers and automatic web browsing. Great. So when thinking about journal databases and exporting tools, found that a good number actually did have really good APIs or exporting tools like Scopus, Nabisco, JSTOR, and Core. Some of these are easily usable by library workers with or without programming or scripting knowledge. Some of these do require a bit of scripting knowledge. Then there's another set of databases that have inaccessible tools. And so some of these are big names like ProQuest, Nexus Uni, Project Muse, and then a more particular one is like the Slavic Humanities Index. Now, I want to be careful and state that when I say that some of these have inaccessible tools, I'm not saying they don't have APIs or tools, but that they're not readily usable. Either you have to pay extra to get those features, or they don't tend to work well, or it's just not easy for a library to learn how to use them. And what I mean by accessible and inaccessible is that it is a tool that a library worker or someone who's interested in using this sort of exporting or gathering information gathering tool can use without extensive knowledge of scripting languages, or it's not cost prohibitive. And I also want to include just like it is usable by folks with differing levels of abilities. So in the way that we might normally think about accessibility. So now I want to talk about, give a couple examples about terms of service just mentions that prohibits these kinds of custom automated tools. So we can see that Abisco states that downloading all or parts of database services in a systematic or regular manner as to create a collection of materials, compromising all or part of the database is strictly prohibited, right? So any sort of systematic downloading, extract information is prohibited. ProQuest has kind of a more explicit terms of service statement that says any sort of automated searches, except for non-burdensome federated searches, are prohibited. The sort of non-burdensome federated searches would be like articles plus gathering, like aggregating information from ProQuest. Now, I'm not by any means a terms of service expert. These are just some examples that I found in sort of my research. Now, there's also some terms of services that are unclear, right? Like Gale's terms of services says that one is allowed to extract and compile data from their services as long as it doesn't violate other terms of service policies. But later on in terms of services, it'll say like access to any parts through automated means is prohibited. So here we find a part where, you know, if you start reading terms of service, you might say, oh yeah, I can actually maybe think about creating a tool for this. And then at the same time, we see that it is prohibited. And we see similar sorts of terms of service statements and a lot of these databases. I'm just not going to go ahead and list all of them because that would be a lot of repetition. So in light of both of these roadblocks, the lack of tools in some of these databases, particularly ProQuest, which I was looking at, and the terms of service restrictions that prohibited me from just like creating a script and navigate it through the website for me, I thought about some semi-automated options. Here I want to talk about like, can we really create library tools without violating these terms of services and perhaps getting in trouble with our vendors? So this led me to sort of the first iteration of my answer, which is creating a simple Python script. So I'm not going to do any demos because I don't want that to sort of be the center of my presentation today, also because time restraint, though I do have all this code in a GitHub repository, which I have a link towards the end of my slides. So what I did with this Python script is that I would go to the web pages, the results that I got in ProQuest. I would save the HTML file, which is you can do by simply right-clicking the page and hitting Save As. Then I would run this Python script, tell it the name of a file that I wanted to read, and then tell it if there's a existing CSV that I want it to add the information to, or if I want it to create a new CSV file. Then what it would do is, based on the titles, it would extract titles and authors from those results based on HTML tags and classes. And what this helped in this project is that it turned what could have been a multi-hour task to a 10-minute task. So here's sort of what it looks like. On the left, we have the HTML file, which is, all sorts of so much information. At the end, this is what the Python script produced, which is primary titles and primary source titles and authors with the name that I wanted to give to the file. My second iteration, I wanted to make something that was a little bit more usable and maybe something that didn't actually require you to run Python code. So I made a sort of a proof of concept Google Chrome extension. So with this Google Chrome extension, when you run it, floating buttons will appear on the top right-hand corner of your screen, as you can see in the picture, with a button left saying extract, button the right saying show list. So if you go to a results page, it'll read the HTML, copy the titles and the author list, and add it to a table here. And then once you're done compiling the results, go ahead and click Save as CSV, and it'll prompt a download window. So what this did was cut down the time even more, because now I didn't have to go and run a Python script multiple times over, and nor did I have to really save each page of my results. I could just navigate through these results. Again, these is a kind of a workaround with terms of service, because I'm not automatically navigating through their site. I'm not using any sort of script to actually engage with a website, just merely reading HTML. So some benefits and limitations of this work was that, obviously save time. The Chrome extension was simple, easy to use. It could potentially be database agnostic, and it could even be used by patrons. Some limitations are that right now it only exports titles and authors. And to add new databases, you have to manually configure it, and you still have to actually navigate those results, as long as it requires long-term maintenance to upload. Here are some possible improvements. I will kind of skip over this in light of time, just so we at least have a couple minutes for questions. But there's definitely a lot of room for improvements. This is just a proof of concept application. What I want to end with is what we can think about moving forward. The first point that I want to make is that library workers should be advocating for accessible tools from database vendors, both tools that allow for batch exporting, as well as accessible APIs for downloading item metadata. And that vendors should make their tools user-friendly, meaning that it should not result in consistent errors, and they should not require you to have extensive programming knowledge. Second is that until we have those solutions from our vendors, that it is possible to make tools that kind of ease the work required in the meantime, right? So we do have a lot of expertise and libraries across departments to sort of figure out maybe solutions to these issues. And I do want to stress automation will not solve every problem, but it can certainly help with sort of iterative tasks such as collections review. And that, especially with cross-departmental relationships, you can better understand what are the tasks that need to be done and maybe who have the skills in order to create solutions to these sort of issues. And that's it. Thank you for listening to my presentation. Here's my email and my GitHub account. The link to the slide stack will be sent out, so you can click on it and just access the GitHub. I also want to say thank you to all the librarians who helped me think through and this project.
Thank you so much. That was really incredibly practical, helpful information that I'm sure people are probably your email inbox is gonna light up with with people who have further questions. I don't know, unless we just have some quick comments that we could take. We are at time, I believe. Well, I'd like to thank everyone for being here, and we will move on to our next session. And please, feel free to contact Rolando with any questions, because this is really valuable work that applies to a lot of things that we're all doing right now. The accolades are rolling into the chat.
Thanks so much, Amy. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.